Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission, well, it's pretty simple. Take really dense source material, extract the knowledge you need, and translate it into usable insight. Today, we are deep diving into digital transformation, but look, we're skipping the glossy executive summary. We're going way beyond the strategic PowerPoints and really focusing on the engine room, the gritty, complex reality of actually doing it, operational execution within the pharmaceutical industry.
Exactly. That's where the rubber really meets the road, isn't it? And honestly, where a lot of these projects stumble, the pharma sector, well, it isn't just trying to move faster like other industries. They're navigating what our sources really nail as a perfect storm of challenges. Implementation gets incredibly complicated because everything they touch is so highly regulated, and fundamentally it's life critical. So we're not just talking about installing some new software. We're actually analyzing this really complex intersection of technology with manufacturing reliability, quality control, that strict regulatory piece, and maybe most importantly, the human factors, the expertise needed.
Right.
So we've really zeroed in on those two key pressure points where this execution challenge is, well, most intense. Supply chain management, SCM, and of course, rigorous regulatory compliance. These aren't just, simple modernization efforts. They are massive infrastructure overhauls. They demand a very specific kind of expertise.
Precisely. And what's really fascinating here is that while the technology is often there, AI, IoT sensors, all the biggest initial roadblock, it's still the workforce. Our sources actually cite that a pervasive skill shortage is actively holding back digital transformation adoption in nearly 49% of organizations. What the job market needs are people who can blend these modern digital skills, things like cybersecurity architecture, machine learning know-how, with that deep, specific pharmaceutical domain knowledge. You need, say, a data scientist who also truly understands cold chain requirements or the intricacies of regulatory filings. Finding that person, it's like finding a unicorn. Okay, let's try and unpack this operational challenge landscape a bit more. Pharma organizations, they're constantly dealing with huge global disruptions. I mean, everything from, obviously, pandemic fallout to geopolitical tensions, all putting immense strain on already complex global supply chains. But even just internally, they struggle with some...
That's a totally fair question. But the potential upside, the return, is exactly why organizations are making that commitment. The expected average return on investment, the ROI, it's substantial. We're talking 425% on average over roughly a 20-month period. An ROI like that, it really shifts the thinking. It moves you away from just continuous, small, incremental improvements, and it justifies making these big, long-term strategic transformation choices. The payoff isn't just a marginal gain. It's aiming for a real structural competitive advantage.
Okay, let's dive into the nuts and bolts then. SCM, starting with Challenge 22, supply chain digitization and visibility. For so many companies, this area is still like a patchwork of fragmented legacy systems, data silos, endless manual documentation, which isn't just slow, it's incredibly prone to error. The goal has to be integrated digital platforms giving genuine end-to-end visibility, right?
Absolutely. And what's really critical is understanding why this visibility matters so much. A fragmented system. That could mean a critical delay in locating a specific batch during a recall. Or maybe an inaccurate view of stock levels leading to over-ordering expensive specialized components you don't actually need yet. When you implement these truly integrated systems, the specific challenges that follow tend to deliver really quantifiable, high-impact benefits.
Okay, so let's look at one. Challenge 23, cold chain management and IoT monitoring. This isn't just some theoretical improvement, is it? This directly impacts the actual integrity of life-saving medicines. What does this look like, on the ground, in practice?
Well, historically, cold chain monitoring often meant, a few periodic manual temperature checks here and there, maybe a data logger checked at the end of a shipment. Now, it means continuous automated surveillance, using networks of IoT sensors actively monitoring temperature, humidity, even location, all in real time. This constant proactive data stream is a complete game changer. The quantifiable benefit our sources point to is a 60% reduction in temperature excursion incidents.
60%, wow. So that translates directly into saving potentially millions on high-value, temperature-sensitive products, biologics, vaccines that might otherwise just get scrapped. All because of a small, unnoticed temperature fluctuation during transit. And the sources estimate a corresponding ROI of 420% just through reduced product spoilage. That alone is a powerful return.
It's huge. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Let's tackle Challenge 24. Inventory optimization. Using AI. Here, we're moving past those old static inventory levels, the traditional model of just always keep 3 months of everything in stock.
Oh.
The new approach uses intelligent management systems,
Hmm.
leveraging sophisticated machine learning algorithms for things like demand sensing and calculating dynamic safety stock levels.
Right, and this is where that human factor issue we talked about earlier really comes back into play, isn't it? AI is powerful, but it's basically useless if the people operating it don't understand the sheer complexity of pharma inventory.
Precisely. You could have the most advanced AI on the planet, but if it doesn't understand the constraints like, say, the 2-year shelf life of a specific active ingredient or the strict regulatory need for batch segregation, it might optimize purely for cost, but at the expense of compliance or even patient safety. That's exactly why the big economic gains, like a 30% reduction in inventory carrying costs and that estimated 475% ROI, are only truly achievable if you hire data scientists who also possess that deep, frankly, quite rare pharmaceutical domain knowledge. They're essentially teaching the AI the complex rules of a highly regulated game.
That context makes that huge ROI figure seem much more realistic, especially given the specialized talent you need. Okay, finally, in the SCM section, let's look at Challenge 28, end-to-end traceability implementation. This feels like the ultimate defense against counterfeit or compromised products entering the supply chain.
It is absolutely fundamental to patient safety, to public trust. It involves using serialization technology, basically. Every single saleable unit gets a unique identifier, like a serial number. And that's coupled with sophisticated platforms, often blockchain, to create these immutable tamper-proof records in digital provenance. You could think of blockchain here as a kind of shared, unbreakable, digitally notarized ledger tracking every single movement of that product from factory to pharmacy.
And what's the actual tangible security benefit you get from this kind of high resource initiative? The sources peg the budget range around, what, $3.2 million?
The payoff is immense, really. Traceability implementation enables, on average, a 75% reduction in counterfeit product infiltration. It's essentially the digital padlock on the entire pharmaceutical value chain. It helps ensure that what the patient ultimately receives is exactly what the legitimate manufacturer intended.
That's a really powerful picture of the operational transformation needed just in the supply chain. Huge changes. But as you said, securing the physical product is only half the battle, right? Because your digital records, your quality processes, your system validation, if those don't satisfy the regulators, none of that supply chain efficiency actually matters in the end. So now we need to transition into that other critical sphere, regulatory compliance.
Yeah, and we should probably mention upfront, implementing the 7 core regulatory challenges we looked at also requires massive investment. Similar scale, actually ranging from $18.2 million up to $21.1 million. But it offers a slightly lower, though still very significant, average ROI of around 350%.
Okay, so why do these regulatory projects cost so much upfront, even if the returns are pretty much guaranteed down the line? Is it just the sheer volume of documentation and validation required?
That's certainly a large part of it. Which brings us right to the absolute core foundation of digital compliance, data integrity. That's Challenge 29. This is about the paramount importance of all electronic records strictly adhering to principles like LLCOA+, and of course mandatory regulations like FDA 21 CFR Part 11 here in the US and EU Annex 11 over in Europe.
Right. Can you quickly unpack LSCOA Plus for us? It's not exactly a household acronym outside of quality assurance circles.
Sure, yeah. LLCOA+ is basically the regulatory gold standard. It ensures data is attributable, who did what when, legible, can it be read, contemporaneous, recorded it at the time it happened, original, the first recording, and accurate, is it correct? The plus adds extra crucial elements like being complete, consistent, enduring, and available. These principles ensure that if a digital record exists, maybe a test result from the lab or a manufacturing batch log, it's completely trustworthy and legally defensible. The measurable benefit of enforcing this kind of rigor, our sources suggest a 75% improvement in audit trail completeness. And that can be the difference between a smooth regulatory inspection and facing a potential plant shutdown. Serious stuff.
Awfully serious. Okay, so following on from data integrity, we then face challenge 30, validation of digital systems. You can't just, buy a new AI system off the shelf or plug in a new IoT network and call it a day in pharma. Every single piece of software, every bit of automation used on a regulated manufacturing line has to be rigorously proven, validated to consistently perform its intended function every single time.
That's exactly right. And that whole validation process itself has had to evolve significantly. It needs to accommodate modern, agile digital development cycles rather than the old, slow waterfall models of the past. Companies now have to follow very structured, risk-based methodologies. Often they leverage frameworks like GAMP5, which stands for Good Automated Manufacturing Practice. GAMP5 essentially provides the roadmap, the framework, for doing risk assessment and managing the entire validation lifecycle for these complex systems.
And the payoff for embracing that rigorous but hopefully smarter risk-based approach, what's the benefit?
Well, the payoff is actually efficiency, not just ticking a compliance box. We see figures like a 40% reduction in the overall validation effort needed, and maybe even more importantly, 50% faster system deployment. Validation used to be notorious for being the longest, slowest choke point in almost any tech project in pharma. Now, these modern approaches, it can be significantly streamlined and systems can get up and running much more quickly.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the ultimate efficiency gain, perhaps in the regulatory world, seems to come from Challenge 35. Regulatory submission automation. This is where automation tools are used to really streamline the compilation of documents, the quality control checks, and the integrated tracking for these incredibly complex submission packages.
Oh, this is absolutely critical for speed to market.
Mhm.
We're talking about submissions like the ECTD, that's the Electronic Common Technical Document. It's the standardized global format for submitting drug applications to regulatory bodies like the FDA or EMA. Automation here can manage the sheer volume and complexity of data involved. And this leads to, according to the sources, a remarkable 450% ROI. That's actually the highest specific return mentioned anywhere in the data we reviewed.
Wow, 450% ROI, and that translates directly into a 70% reduction in submission preparation time. I mean, if a critical new drug can reach the final approval stage 70% faster, the strategic advantage for the company and frankly the public health benefit is just massive.
It really is. And maybe one final point here. Let's look at a really foundational change in quality control itself. Challenge 31, real-time release testing, or RTRT. This fundamentally transforms the whole manufacturing philosophy. Instead of the old way you make a batch, you send samples to the lab, you wait days or even weeks for end product testing results, and then you release it. RTRT involves implementing continuous quality monitoring during manufacturing process, using process analytical technology, and enabling automated decision-making throughout.
That sounds like a truly massive operational shift, moving from that traditional batch and wait model to something much more like a continuous flow, continuous quality verification model.
It is genuinely a revolution in quality assurance thinking, and the results are pretty stunning. Implementing RTRT systems can significantly reduce the overall release testing time by 70%. The product is essentially being assessed and approved in terms of quality while it's still being made. So, to kind of summarize the core takeaway from this whole deep dive, digital transformation in the pharmaceutical world, it really hinges entirely on systematically managing these operational and regulatory challenges. It has to be coordinated, and yes, it's costly. But it requires that critical shift in thinking, moving past just focusing on incremental, continuous improvement, important as that is, towards making these big, long-term structural strategic choices.
Right. And the successful execution of all these initiatives we've discussed, the precision of AI predicting inventory needs, the security that blockchain traceability offers, the speed from automation in regulatory filings, it all ultimately connects back to ensuring the quality, the safety, and the reliable delivery of life-saving treatments to patients worldwide. This isn't just, some internal business case for cutting operational costs. It feels like a structural necessity for the industry to uphold its fundamental mission.
Well said. And maybe that leads us perfectly into our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given the clear benefits we're seeing from AI in areas like predictive inventory that was challenge 24 and this major shift towards real-time release testing and manufacturing, challenge 31, where automated systems are increasingly making those crucial final quality assurance decisions, what do you think the ultimate ethical and regulatory framework needs to look like? What happens when machine intelligence, rather than a human reviewer, is potentially responsible for the final release or approval of a pharmaceutical product hitting the market? That convergence point, and it's something we're definitely watching very closely.